The storm that night was the worst Thomas had seen in his 15 years working at Mike's Gas and Service. Most folks hurried past, eager to get home, but when he noticed a woman standing in the rain beside her broken-down car, Thomas didn't hesitate. He grabbed his old umbrella and toolkit, just like his father had taught him. The woman was soaked through, shivering in her business suit. Thomas brought her inside, made her coffee, and fixed her car using parts from his own vehicle. When she tried to pay him, he simply shook his head and smiled. She drove away with just a soft "thank you." But that wasn't the end of their story. Could Thomas have guessed that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning after the storm dawned clear and crisp, washing away the previous night's drama. Thomas arrived at Mike's Gas and Service just as the sun peeked over the horizon, his father's old toolkit tucked under his arm like always. The metal box, weathered and dented from decades of use, held more than just wrenches and sockets. It carried memories of Sunday afternoons spent learning at his father's side, the smell of motor oil mixing with his mother's fresh-baked cookies. He unlocked the station's front door, flicking on the fluorescent lights that hummed to life reluctantly. The place wasn't much, but it was home. Faded linoleum floors had been mopped so many times the pattern was barely visible. And the coffee maker in the corner had seen better days, but everything was clean. Thomas made sure of that. "Morning, son," came a familiar gravelly voice. Mike shuffled in through the back door, moving slower these days, but still arriving early as he had for the past 40 years. His white hair was carefully combed, though. His lined face showed the weight of recent worries. "Morning, Mike. Coffee's almost ready." Thomas grabbed 2 mugs from under the counter, one with a chip in the rim, Mike's favorite. "How's the hip today?" Mike eased himself onto his usual stool behind the register. "About as good as this old place's profit margins." He tried to laugh, but it came out more like a sigh. "Bills came in yesterday. Getting harder to keep up with the maintenance this place needs," Thomas nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. The big chain station that opened across town last year had been stealing their regular customers one by one. They still had. Their loyalists, the truckers who'd been stopping here for decades, the local farmers who appreciated Mike's willingness to run tabs when times were tight. But it wasn't enough anymore. "I've been thinking," Thomas said, sliding Mike's coffee across the counter. "Maybe we could start offering some basic mechanical services. I've got the skills, and there's that empty bay out back. Might bring in some extra income." Mike's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You sound just like your father. He was always full of ideas, too." He took a careful sip of his coffee. "But we'd need equipment, tools. That takes money we don't have." Thomas pulled his toolkit closer, running his fingers over the worn latches. "I've got tools. We could start small, just basic repairs and maintenance at first. Oil changes, battery replacements, that kind of thing." "You'd be willing to use your own tools?" Mike asked, though he already knew the answer. That was Thomas, always giving, just like he had during last night's storm. Mike had watched from the window as his young employee helped that stranded woman, using parts from his own car to get her back on the road. "This place is worth investing in," Thomas said simply. He meant it. The station had been his second home since he was 16, when Mike had given him a chance despite his lack of experience. Back then, he'd been a high school dropout trying to help his mother make ends meet after his father's passing. Mike had done more than offer him a job. He'd offered him a future. The morning rolled on, customers trickling in for gas and coffee. Thomas kept busy, restocking shelves, helping elderly Mrs. Peterson figure out how to use the new card reader at the pump, and changing out the windshield washer fluid displays. All the while, his mind worked on plans for the repair service, calculating costs and potential pricing in his head. Around noon, Mike called him into the small office in the back. Papers were spread across the desk. Bills, invoices, bank statements. The numbers told a story Thomas had already suspected. "We're not going to make it through winter without changes," Mike said quietly. "Property taxes are due next month, and the heating system needs repairs before the cold sets in." He looked up at Thomas, his eyes tired but determined. "I'm thinking of selling." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Selling to whom? That chain across town has been sniffing around. They'd probably turn it into one of their express stores. Mike's voice was heavy with resignation. "At least then, I'd know the place would keep running, even if it wouldn't be the same." Thomas gripped the edge of the desk, memories flooding. His mind, the Christmas Eve when his car wouldn't start, and Mike stayed late to help him fix it. The day he'd finally earned his GED, and Mike had closed early to take him out to dinner. The countless mornings of coffee and conversation, learning about life from a man who'd become more than just a boss. "Give me a chance," Thomas heard himself say. "Let me try to turn things around. The repair service idea could work, and I've been reading about small business management online. There are other things we could try too." Mike studied him for a long moment. "You really care about this old place that much?" "It's not just the place," Thomas replied. "It's what it means. To the community, to you." He paused. "To me." A smile slowly spread across Mike's weathered face. "All right, son. We'll give it 3 months. If we can't turn things around by then." He left the sentence unfinished. Thomas nodded, determination settling in his chest. He'd make it work. He had to. As he walked back to the front counter, his father's toolkit caught his eye. Inside was a small engraving on the lid that he'd traced. Countless times over the years, every problem has a solution. You just have to be willing to find it. What Thomas didn't know then was that the solution would arrive in the most unexpected way, walking back through their door in designer heels, instead of rain-soaked business wear. But that was tomorrow's surprise. For now, he had work to do. Later that evening, as Thomas wiped down the counter for the night shift, his fingers brushed against something stuck beneath the register, a coffee-stained receipt from the night before. The paper was wrinkled, but he could still make out the simple order: 1 regular coffee, $1.75. Such a small transaction for a night that kept playing through his mind. The storm had started around 6, turning the twilight into premature darkness. Rain drummed against the metal awning over the pumps, creating a symphony of hollow pings that echoed through the empty station. Most customers had the sense to stay home, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts and the steady rhythm of the storm. He'd been organizing the creamer packets when he first saw her through the rain-streaked windows. A solitary figure in the harsh glare of the overhead lights, standing beside a sleek sedan that had clearly given up the ghost. Her shoulders were hunched against the wind, tailored blazer soaked through, as she peered under the hood with a cell. Phone's weak light. Thomas had seen plenty of stranded motorists over the years. Most nowadays just called roadside assistance or waited in their cars for help. But something about her determination, trying to solve the problem herself, despite the elements, struck a chord. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the rain, his father's toolkit in one hand and a battered umbrella in the other. "Evening, ma'am," he called out, raising his voice over the storm. "Need a hand?" She turned, and Thomas caught his first real look at her face. Elegant features, but with a weariness around the eyes that spoke of a long day, made longer by circumstance. "The battery, I think," she said, maintaining her composure despite being drenched. "Won't turn over." Thomas positioned the umbrella to shield her, noting how she initially seemed surprised by the gesture. Up close, her clothes spoke of money, the kind of tailored suit you didn't find at department stores, but there was nothing pretentious in her manner. "Let's take a look," he said, setting his toolkit down. The problem was obvious once he checked. The battery terminals. Corrosion had built up, creating a poor connection that the rain had only made worse. An easy fix, but the battery itself was weak. It might get her home tonight, but it wouldn't last much longer. "You should come inside while I work on this," Thomas suggested, seeing how she shivered. "Coffee's fresh, and it's warmer than standing out here." She hesitated. And Thomas understood. A woman alone at night, a stranger offering help. The world had taught people to be wary. "The coffee maker's right by the window," he added. "You can keep an eye on your car the whole time." A small smile touched her lips, acknowledging his understanding. "Thank you. Coffee would be wonderful." Inside, she cradled the cheap ceramic mug in her hands, warming them as she watched Thomas work through the window. He moved efficiently, using parts from his own toolkit to clean and temporarily strengthen the connection. But the battery itself worried him. When he came back in, rain dripping from his jacket, she had left her mug on the counter and was studying the old photographs on the wall, faded snapshots of the station through the years. One showed Mike as a young man, standing proudly in front of newly installed pumps. Another captured a local Little League team the station had sponsored back in the 90s. "This place has history," she observed, her voice carrying a note of appreciation. Thomas nodded, reaching for a paper towel to dry his hands. 43 years, same owner, same commitment to service. Not many places like it left. "No," she agreed quietly. "There aren't." Something in her tone suggested she understood more than she was saying. "Your car should start now," Thomas told her. "But that battery's on its last legs. I'd recommend getting it replaced soon." "I would have done it tonight, but I used my spare helping another customer last week." She reached for her purse, a designer label he didn't recognize. "How much do I owe you?" Thomas shook his head. "No charge. Just be sure to get that battery looked at soon as you can." "I insist," she pressed, but there was something in her eyes. Not pity or condescension, but a kind of curious wonder. "The coffee's $1.75, he said with a smile, "but the help is free. My father always said some things are worth more than money." She studied him for a moment, then placed $2 on the counter. "Keep the change," she said. And though the words were common enough, her tone made them sound different, like she meant something more than the quarter she was leaving behind. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the umbrella, the coffee, all of it." Then she was gone, her car's taillights disappearing into the storm. Thomas picked up the coffee mug she'd left behind, noticing the faint imprint of lipstick on the rim. Such an ordinary thing, that mug. He'd served thousands of coffees in identical cups over the years, but something about this one felt different. He glanced at the coffee-stained receipt still in his hand, then carefully folded it and tucked it into his wallet. A reminder, though, of what exactly, he wasn't sure. The storm continued through the night, but its rhythm had changed, or perhaps something in Thomas had. As he finished his closing duties, straightening shelves and counting the register, his mind kept returning to that moment of connection. Not just with her, but with everything his father had taught him about service, about treating people with dignity, regardless of circumstance. He didn't know then that the receipt in his wallet would become a bookmark in his life story, marking the page where everything began to change. All he knew was that he'd done what felt right, just as he'd been taught. Sometimes that had to be enough. 2 days after the storm, the morning light painted Mike's Gas and Service in shades of gold. Thomas was changing the prices on the manual sign out front. Their outdated system still required physically hanging numbers rather than the digital displays their competitors used. When he heard it, the distinct purr of a luxury engine, smoother than anything that usually pulled into their lot, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, gleaming silver in the morning sun, eased to a stop beside pump number 3. Thomas paused, price number still in hand, watching. As the back door opened, a woman stepped out and his breath caught. The tailored business suit and elegant posture were the same, but everything else had transformed. Gone was the drenched, vulnerable stranger from the storm. In her place stood someone who radiated quiet authority. She smiled when their eyes met, and Thomas recognized it from that night. The same gentle expression, now accompanied by something that looked almost like anticipation. He set down the price number and wiped his palms on his work shirt, suddenly aware of the grease stains on his uniform. "Good morning," she said, approaching with measured steps. From her briefcase, she withdrew a business card and held it out. "I believe I owe you a proper introduction. I'm Catherine Wells." Thomas accepted the card automatically, his eyes widening. As he read the embossed text, Catherine Wells, CEO of Wells Technologies, the same Wells Technologies that had revolutionized renewable energy storage and was worth billions. The same Catherine Wells, whose photo he'd scrolled past countless times in news articles about technological innovation and corporate leadership. He started, then stopped, unsure what to say. "Thank you for the quarter," suddenly seemed inadequate. Her laugh was warm, genuine. "You look exactly how I felt when I realized I'd left a 25-cent tip for someone who'd just saved me from a very unpleasant night." The coffee was only $1.75, Thomas managed, finding his footing in the familiar fact. "The coffee was perfect," she corrected, "and the kindness was priceless." She glanced around the station, taking in the worn but well-maintained property. "Is Mike in? I'd like to speak with both of you." Thomas nodded, still trying to process this sudden shift in his reality. "He's in the office. Would you like me to—" "Please," she said. "And Thomas, you don't need to change your shirt. I prefer honest grease stains to dishonest polish any day." The walk to Mike's office felt surreal. Thomas led the way, acutely aware of Catherine Wells, no longer just the mysterious woman from the storm, following behind him. He could hear his own heartbeat over the familiar squeak of the hallway's linoleum tiles. Mike looked up from his paperwork as they entered, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. His eyes widened slightly at Catherine's appearance, but years of dealing with all types of customers had given him an unshakable composure. "Mike," Thomas said, his voice steadier than he felt, "this is Catherine Wells. She'd like to speak with us." Mike stood, offering his hand. "Ms. Wells, what can we do for you?" Catherine shook his hand, then settled into one of the two chairs facing Mike's desk. Thomas remained standing, feeling oddly like he should be taking notes or offering coffee, anything, to give his hand something to do. "Please sit," she said to Thomas, and there was something in her tone that made it clear this conversation would require everyone on equal footing. Once they were all seated, Catherine opened her briefcase and removed a folder. "First, I want to thank you both for running the kind of business that's becoming increasingly rare in our world. A place where service still means something more than a transaction." Mike nodded, though his expression showed he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. In their experience, praise from wealthy visitors usually preceded purchase offers. "I've spent the past day looking into your station," Catherine continued. "Your history, your role in the community, your financial situation." She held up a hand. As Mike started to speak, "Don't worry, I'm not here to take advantage of your circumstances, quite the opposite." She opened the folder, revealing documents Thomas couldn't quite read from his angle. "I'm here because 2 nights ago, I was reminded of something important. Something I'd forgotten in the midst of quarterly reports and shareholder meetings." Her eyes met Thomas's. The simple power of helping someone without expecting anything in return. "It was nothing special," Thomas said quietly. "Anyone would have—" "But they didn't," Catherine interrupted gently. "I watched 17 cars drive past before you came out with that umbrella. Each of those drivers made a choice, just as you did. Just as Mike did years ago when he gave a chance to a teenage dropout who needed work." Thomas felt his chest tighten. At her words, she'd done her research thoroughly. "I have a proposition," she said, turning back to Mike. "One that I hope will honor what you've built here while ensuring it survives long into the future." She drew out a document and placed it on the desk. "I want to buy the station." She raised her hand again as both men stiffened, "and give it to Thomas." The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas could hear the distant ding of the pump outside, signaling a customer neither he nor Mike. "Move to assist." "I don't understand," Thomas finally said. Catherine's expression softened. "Yes, you do. You understand better than most that sometimes, when someone shows true character, the right response is to give them an opportunity to do even more good in the world." Mike picked up the document with trembling hands. This is the purchase. Price is fair market value plus 50%, Catherine finished. Enough to ensure your retirement is comfortable, Mike. And Thomas, she turned to face him directly. The station would be yours, free and clear. My only conditions are that you keep the current staff, maintain the community service programs, and consider letting me help modernize some of the equipment. As a silent partner, of course. Thomas looked at Mike, who was still staring at the numbers on the page, then at Catherine, who waited patiently as though she hadn't just offered to transform their lives with a gesture that probably represented pocket change to her. Why? He asked finally. Her answer was simple. Because kindness shouldn't be as rare as it's become, and because sometimes the best investment we can make is in people who understand that. The station's deed lay on Thomas's kitchen table that evening, its crisp legal pages stark against the worn wood. He'd read it 3 times already, understanding the words, but still struggling to accept their meaning. Mike had sent him home early, insisting he needed time to think about Catherine's offer properly. The sound of a gentle knock startled him. Opening his door, he found Catherine standing there, looking somehow both powerful and uncertain in the fading daylight. I hope I'm not overstepping, she said. Mike gave me your address. I thought you might have questions. Thomas stepped back, gesturing for her to enter. His small apartment above Henderson's Hardware suddenly felt inadequate, but Catherine moved through the space as naturally as she had in his gas station, settling into one of his mismatched kitchen chairs. It's too much, he said finally, sitting across from her. The station, the responsibility, the faith someone is placing in you, Catherine finished quietly. She reached out and touched the deed. You know, when I started Wells Technologies, it was in a garage with borrowed equipment. Everyone told me I was reaching too high, taking on too much. A soft smile crossed her face. But one person saw something in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. What happened to them? Thomas asked, genuinely curious. She passed away last year. My grandmother. Catherine's fingers traced the edge of the deed. She ran a small diner in Ohio, taught me that true success isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give back. She met his eyes. When I was standing in that rain the other night, watching you use parts from your own car to help a complete stranger, I saw her values living on in you. Thomas sat back, processing her words. I'm not a businessman. I barely finished my GED. You're a problem solver, a community builder. The business part? She shrugged. That's just mechanics of a different kind. Besides, her eyes sparkled slightly, I might know a thing or two about running a successful business, and you'd help? The question came out more vulnerable than he'd intended. As much or as little as you want. This isn't about me taking over. And Thomas, it's about preserving something valuable while helping it grow. She paused, then added softly, though I admit, I find myself hoping you'll want my involvement, and not just for business reasons. The honesty in her voice made his heart skip. Here was one of the most powerful women in the country, sitting in his humble kitchen, looking at him like he was something precious she'd discovered. Mike's like a father to me, Thomas said. This place, these people, they're my family. I know. Catherine's response was simple, but filled with understanding. That's exactly why it should be yours. Thomas looked at the deed again, seeing beyond the legal text to what it represented. Not just ownership of a gas station, but the chance to protect and nurture the community that had given him a home when he needed one most. If I say yes, he began slowly, I'd want to do it right, learn everything I can, make it something my father would have been proud of. Catherine's smile widened. I think he already is. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to Mike. I'll be in town until Monday. She moved toward the door, then turned back. And Thomas? Sometimes the biggest act of kindness is accepting help when it's offered freely. After she left, Thomas sat for a long time, looking at the deed in the growing darkness. Finally, he reached for his wallet and pulled out the coffee-stained receipt from the night of the storm. Such a small thing to have set such big changes in motion. But then again, maybe that's how the best changes happened. Not in grand gestures, but in simple moments of human connection. He picked up his phone to call Mike. Some decisions, he realized, weren't really decisions at all. They were just recognizing the path that had been there all along, waiting for you to be ready to walk. A week later, Thomas sat in what was now his office, a business management textbook open on the desk before him. Catherine had sent it over, along with several others, each carefully tabbed and annotated in her elegant handwriting. "Start here," her note had read. "The best leaders are always learning." The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across pages filled with terms he was struggling to understand. Profit margins, capital expenditure, operational overhead. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of all he didn't. "No." A knock at the doorframe made him look up. Catherine stood there, dressed more casually than he'd seen her yet, though her version of casual still looked expertly tailored. "How's the reading going?" "Like learning a foreign language," he admitted, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Did you really study all this?" She sat down, smiling. "I did, and I highlighted the parts where I spilled coffee trying to stay awake." She reached over, flipping to a page where, sure enough, a faint brown stain marked the corner. "Nobody's born knowing this stuff, Thomas. We all start somewhere." He found himself relaxing slightly. "Mike's been catching me up on the accounts. Some of it makes sense. It's just numbers after all, but the rest," he gestured at the textbook. "Tell me what you do understand," Catherine suggested. "Sometimes we know more than we think." Thomas leaned back, gathering his thoughts. "Well, I know we need to modernize some things, the manual price sign out front, the ancient register system, but we also need to keep what makes this place special." He paused. "Yesterday, Mrs. Peterson came in for her usual coffee. She told me she's been coming here since her husband was alive because we're the only station that still helps her pump her gas. Said the fancy new place across town has better prices, but nobody there knows her name." Catherine's eyes softened. "That's business management too, you know. Understanding your market, your competitive advantage. What else? The repair service idea. I think it could work. We've got the space and I've got the skills, but we'd need equipment, proper diagnostic tools." He hesitated. "That's capital expenditure, right?" "Look who's speaking the language already," Catherine teased gently. She pulled a tablet from her bag, quickly typing notes. "What if we started with basic services, oil changes, tire rotations, battery replacements? Build the customer base gradually, while you learn what the community needs most." They spent the next hour like that, with Thomas sharing his practical knowledge of the station's operations, while Catherine helped him translate it into business terms. She never made him feel foolish for asking questions, and somehow her presence made the textbook's concepts feel less intimidating. "You're a natural at this," she said finally, checking her watch. "You understand people, and that's half of business right there. The rest is just tools to help you serve them better." Thomas looked at her thoughtfully. "Why are you really doing all this? You could have bought 100 stations with less effort than you're putting into helping me with this one." Catherine was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the tablet. "When I was building my company, everyone wanted to know about the technology, the innovations. Nobody asked about the people who helped me get there. The mechanic who taught me about engines when I was developing our first electric car prototype. The diner owner who fed me on credit when I was spending every penny on research." She met his eyes. "Success isn't just about having good ideas. It's about having people who believe in you enough to help you learn how to make those ideas work." The sunlight had shifted, warming the office and casting a soft glow around Catherine as she spoke. Thomas found himself noticing the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she was sharing something personal, how her professional facade softened into something more real. "I should get going," she said, standing. "Board meeting this afternoon." "But Thomas," she tapped the textbook, "don't worry about memorizing everything. Focus on understanding the principles, and call me anytime you need a translator." After she left, Thomas turned back to the textbook with renewed determination. The foreign terms began to look less intimidating, like tools waiting to be mastered rather than obstacles to be feared. And if he found himself paying special attention to Catherine's handwritten notes in the margins, well, that was just part of the learning process too. The old newspaper clipping fell out of one of Catherine's business books, while Thomas was shelving them in his office. Yellowed with age, it showed a much younger Catherine standing in front of a run-down garage, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing oil-stained coveralls. The headline read, "Local mechanic's daughter wins state science fair with revolutionary battery design." He was still studying it when Catherine arrived for their weekly meeting. She paused in the doorway, seeing the clipping in his hands, and something flickered across her face. Not embarrassment, but a kind of wistful recognition. "Dad kept that framed in his shop until the day he died," she said, moving to stand beside him. "He was more proud of that article than any of the Forbes covers that came later." Thomas looked at the garage in the photo. "Your father was a mechanic, third generation." Catherine sat on the edge of his desk, closer than usual. "That garage was his life. He taught me everything about cars, engines, how things worked." She smiled softly. "He used to say understanding machines was easy. It was understanding people that took real skill." "What happened to the garage?" Thomas asked, noting how the past tense hung heavy in her words. Catherine's fingers brushed the edge of the clipping. "Progress. A big development company bought up the whole block, offered 3 times what the property was worth. Dad refused at first, but then Mom got sick, the medical bills." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "That's when I decided to start Wells Technologies. I wanted to create something that would help small businesses survive against the corporate giants, something that would have saved his garage." Thomas studied her face, seeing beyond the polished executive to the mechanic's daughter who understood exactly what places like Mike's Gas and Service meant to their communities. "Is that why you helped us?" "Partly," she admitted. "When I saw you that night, using your own parts to help a stranger, it reminded me so much of Dad. He used to do the same thing." She met Thomas's eyes. "But it's more than that. You remind me of what I used to be before board meetings and shareholder reports started taking up all my time. Sometimes we need reminders of who we really are." "And who are you, really?" Thomas asked softly. Catherine reached for the clipping, her fingers brushing his. "Someone who never forgot where she came from, who built a fortune but still misses the smell of motor oil and the satisfaction of fixing something with her own hands." She paused. "Someone who might have been hiding in a storm that night, waiting to see if anyone still believed in helping strangers." The admission hung between them, intimate and honest. Thomas thought about his father's toolkit, about Mike's faith in him, about Catherine's quiet strength beneath her corporate armor. "Your father would be proud," he said. "Not of the fortune or the company, though those are impressive, but of how you're using them to help people like him." Catherine's smile held a hint of moisture in her eyes. "You know what else he would have loved? This place, the way you run it, the way you treat people." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Keep the clipping. It's good to remember where we come from. It helps us see more clearly where we're going." As she turned to leave, Thomas called after her. "Catherine, next time you miss working with your hands, I've got a '67 Mustang in the back bay that needs some attention. Previous owner couldn't figure out what was wrong with it." She paused, a genuine grin spreading across her face. "Electrical system or fuel line?" "Both, maybe. I could use a second opinion, preferably from someone who won state science fairs with battery designs." "Saturday morning?" she suggested, and there was an almost girlish excitement in her voice. "I'll bring the coffee," Thomas promised. After she left, he carefully placed the clipping in a frame he'd brought from home. Setting it on his desk, he smiled at the young woman in coveralls who had grown into the remarkable person he was coming to. No, some shadows from the past, he realized, cast light instead of darkness. The renovation plans spread across the hood of the '67 Mustang, weighted down by spare parts and coffee cups. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the bay doors, warming the concrete floor as Catherine leaned over the engine, her designer. A blouse traded for a Wells Technologies company shirt, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. "Try it now," she called, making a final adjustment to the fuel line. Thomas turned the key, and the engine roared to life with a smooth, powerful purr. Catherine's face lit up with triumph, a streak of grease on her cheek, making her look more alive than he'd ever seen her. "Just like riding a bicycle," she said, closing the hood. Her eyes fell on the renovation plans. "Speaking of fixing things," Thomas nodded, wiping his hands on a shop rag. The blueprint showed a careful balance of old and new, modern, digital. Displays alongside the classic brick facade, updated service bays that preserved the station's original character. Catherine had worked with the architects to ensure every change served a purpose beyond mere aesthetics. "The contractors can start next week," he said, tracing the outline of the new service area. "But I'm worried about Mrs. Peterson and the others. Change isn't easy for them." Catherine perched on a nearby workbench, looking thoughtful. "Tell me about the digital price signs. What's really bothering you about them?" Thomas considered the question. "Every morning I change those numbers manually. People stop, chat while I'm doing it. Mr. Jenkins tells me about his grandkids. Sarah from the diner brings coffee sometimes." He gestured at the plans. "It's not just about displaying prices. It's about those moments of connection." "So we adapt," Catherine said, reaching for a pencil. She began marking up the plans. "What if we kept one manual sign, make it a feature rather than a flaw? Traditional service, modern convenience." She smiled. "Sometimes preserving the heart of something means choosing carefully what to keep." They spent the next hour revising the plans, finding ways to blend progress with tradition. Catherine understood instinctively what Thomas was trying to protect, the human elements that made the station more than just a business. "You know," she said, studying the final revisions, "most people would have just taken the modernization package without question. The fact that you're fighting to preserve these connections, it matters." "I learned from the best," Thomas replied, glancing at Mike's office where his mentor was doing weekend paperwork. "He taught me that a business is really just an excuse to take care of people." Catherine's expression softened. "My father used to say something similar. The money pays the bills, he'd tell me, but the relationships build the future." She looked down at her grease-stained hands. "I forgot that somewhere along the way, between quarterly reports and shareholder meetings." "And now?" Thomas asked quietly. "Now, I'm remembering. Thanks to a gas station owner who still changes his prices by hand and fixes strangers' cars in the rain." Her eyes met his, holding something warmer than professional admiration. The moment was interrupted by Mike's arrival, his experienced eye taking in the running Mustang and the marked-up plans. "Looks like you two make a good team," he observed, with a knowing smile. "Catherine figured out the fuel line issue," Thomas said quickly, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "And Thomas spotted the electrical problem I missed," Catherine added, reaching for her coffee cup. "Sometimes it takes two perspectives to see the whole picture." Mike picked up the revised plans, nodding approvingly. "Like keeping the manual sign alongside the digital ones? Smart. Gives people what they need while preserving what they love." He looked between them with twinkling eyes. "Funny how often that principle applies beyond business." After Mike left, Catherine gathered her things, reluctantly checking her phone. "Board meeting prep," she explained. "But this was nice. Reminds me of Saturdays in Dad's garage." "Same time next week?" Thomas suggested. "The Mustang's running, but that transmission could use some attention." "It's a date," Catherine said, then quickly added, "I mean, an appointment. A meeting." She brushed at the grease streak on her cheek, missing it entirely. Thomas watched her go, smiling at her flustered departure. The renovation plans remained on the workbench, their careful blend of progress and preservation, somehow reflecting more than just changes to the station. Some growth. He was learning, strengthened roots rather than replacing them. The threatening letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, printed on expensive letterhead from Valley View Stations, Inc. Thomas found it propped against the door when he arrived to open up. Inside, beneath corporate pleasantries, lay an unmistakable message: sell now or face the consequences of going against a chain with deep pockets. He was still staring at it when Catherine arrived for their weekly review meeting. She took one look at his face and set her briefcase down. "What's wrong?" Thomas handed her the letter wordlessly. She read it quickly, her expression hardening into something he hadn't seen before. The CEO who had built an empire replacing the woman who spent Saturdays fixing cars with him. "Valley View," she said, voice tight. "They've been acquiring independent stations up and down the coast, converting them all to their express store model." She looked up at Thomas. "They're the ones who tried to buy this place before I did." "They're opening another location," Thomas said quietly, 2 blocks away. "The letter says they'll price us out of business if we don't sell." He managed a weak smile. "Guess they didn't do their research about the new ownership." Catherine's eyes flashed. "Oh, they did. This isn't just about your station anymore. They're sending me a message too. Stay in tech, stay out of our industry." She placed the letter on the counter with deliberate care. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." "What do you mean?" "Valley View runs on outdated software for their inventory and pricing systems. Wells Technologies has been developing a next-generation management platform specifically for independent stations." She smiled, and there was steel beneath the warmth. "We were months from launch, but I think your station just became our perfect beta test site." Thomas leaned against the counter. "Catherine, you don't have to fight for what matters." She interrupted. "Isn't that exactly what you've been teaching me to remember?" She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Besides, I have a personal interest in seeing this place succeed." The morning sun caught her hair as she moved, and Thomas found himself wondering if she meant the station or something more. Before he could pursue that thought, Mike burst through the door, waving a handful of papers. "They're undercutting our gas prices by 30 cents a gallon," he exclaimed, "and offering free coffee and—" He stopped short, seeing Catherine. "Oh, you already—" "No, we do," Catherine confirmed. "And we're not playing their game." "Thomas, what's our real advantage here? What do we have that they can't copy?" Thomas thought about Mrs. Peterson's smile when he helped her with her gas, about the local kids who came in for free air for their bike tires, about the truckers who planned their routes around his coffee and conversation. "Relationships," he said finally. "Community." "Exactly." Catherine pulled out her tablet. "So we leverage that. The new software system will help us run more efficiently, cut costs without cutting corners. We'll price match when we can, but we'll offer something they can't: genuine service and connection." She began typing rapidly. "We'll start a loyalty program, but make it about more than points and discounts. Free basic safety checks with fill-ups. A monthly community dinner in the renovated service bay. Mike's famous coffee available by subscription." She looked up. "And we'll partner with local businesses. That diner down the street, the auto parts store on 5th. Create a network of support." Mike whistled softly. "You're not just fighting back. You're changing the game." "That's what innovators do," Catherine said, but she was looking at Thomas. "We see possibilities others miss. Like the value of a gas station that still changes its prices by hand." Thomas picked up the threatening letter, then deliberately tore it in half. "Valley View wants to make this about money, but it's really about choice, giving people a place that treats them like neighbors, not transactions." Catherine's smile widened. "Now you're thinking like a CEO." She checked her watch. "I need to make some calls, get things moving with the software team. But Thomas—" She paused at the door. "Save Saturday morning for me. The Mustang's transmission isn't going to fix itself." After she left, Mike clapped Thomas on the shoulder. "You know she's not really coming for the transmission, right?" Thomas watched through the window as Catherine walked to her car, already on her phone, fighting battles for a small gas station that had somehow become important to her. "Yeah," he said softly, "I'm starting to figure that out." The hand-drawn customer service manual took shape over several late nights, Thomas sketching his ideas in a leather-bound notebook Catherine had given him. It wasn't the typical corporate handbook. Instead of rigid protocols, he filled it with stories and principles, each page illustrated with his own simple drawings of real customers and situations. "Remember Mrs. Peterson's umbrella," one page read, accompanied by a sketch of the elderly regular. "She leaves it behind every rainy Tuesday when she comes for gas and her lottery ticket. Always blue with white polka dots. Always needs reminding. Always grateful for the small kindness of remembering." Catherine found him working on it one evening, long after the station had closed. She'd stopped by to drop off the latest software updates, but lingered, drawn in by the personal touch of his approach. "This is remarkable," she said, carefully turning the pages. "Most businesses have policy manuals. You're creating a community." "Story!" Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, slightly embarrassed. "It probably seems unprofessional." "It seems perfect," Catherine interrupted. She paused at a page about the local truck drivers. "You've included their coffee preferences and their kids' names. Joe's youngest just started college," Thomas explained. "He worries about her, so we always ask how she's doing. Makes his regular route feel more like visiting friends." He shrugged. "The big chains have loyalty programs with points and rewards. We have conversations and connections." Catherine sat on the edge of his desk, closer than usual. "You know what? The hardest part of running Wells Technologies is maintaining that personal touch as we grow. I have 30,000 employees, and sometimes I feel like I don't really know any of them." "Is that why you keep coming back here?" Thomas asked softly. "To remember what it feels like?" She met his eyes. "That's how it started." "Now," she trailed off, her hand resting near his on the desk. "Now I think I'm coming back for different reasons." The evening silence wrapped around them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Through the window, the station's newly installed digital sign glowed alongside the classic Manual 1, progress and tradition finding their balance. "Tell me about this page," Catherine said finally, turning to a fresh sketch. "I don't recognize this customer." Thomas glanced down and felt his cheeks warm. Without conscious intention, he'd drawn Catherine as she looked on their Saturday mornings, hair pulled back, focused on the Mustang's engine, that familiar streak of grease somehow always ending up on her left cheek. "That's, he started, but she was smiling. "You got the grease smudge right," she said. "I never can seem to avoid it." "It's part of your charm," Thomas replied before he could stop himself. "I mean, I know what you mean," Catherine said gently. She touched the sketch with careful fingers. "You see people, Thomas, really see them. Not their titles or their bank accounts or their cars, just them." She took a deep breath. "You see me." The manual lay open between them, its pages filled with the faces and stories of a community. But in that moment, Thomas could focus only on one face, one story, the remarkable woman who had walked into his station on a rainy night and somehow never really left. "The transmission's almost done," he said, breaking the charged silence. "On the Mustang." Catherine's smile held a touch of sadness. "I know. We'll have to find another excuse for Saturday mornings." "There's always the carburetor," Thomas suggested. "It could use some attention." "The carburetor," Catherine repeated, standing. "Right." She gathered her things, but paused at the door. "You know, my calendar is surprisingly clear this Friday evening. If someone wanted to maybe discuss carburetor repair over dinner," Thomas felt his heart skip. "I know a good diner down the street. Sarah's cooking is better than any fancy restaurant." "Sarah, who always brings you coffee when you're changing the manual sign?" "You remember that?" Catherine tapped the service manual. "I pay attention to the important details too." She smiled. "Friday at 7? You can tell me more about your vision. In for this place." After she left, Thomas turned back to his manual, adding one more note beneath the sketch of Catherine. Sometimes the most important service we provide is simply making space for real connections to grow. The local newspaper feature caught them both by surprise. From employee to owner, a modern fairy tale, the headline declared, accompanied by a photo of Thomas and Catherine working on the Mustang during one of their Saturday sessions. Someone had captured the moment without them noticing. Catherine pointing out something in the engine, Thomas leaning in close, both of them smiling with an ease that spoke of more than just professional collaboration. Thomas discovered the article when Mr. Jenkins brought in a copy during his morning coffee run. "Your front-page news, son," the elderly regular said with a knowing wink. "About time someone told this story properly." The article was surprisingly detailed, weaving together the night of the storm, Catherine's gift of the station, and their ongoing partnership. It painted a picture of small-town values meeting corporate conscience, but it was the personal undertones that made Thomas's chest tighten as he read. Sources close to the station speak of Saturday morning repair sessions that have become something of a local legend, the article noted. Where else can you find a tech billionaire in work clothes, learning the art of manual price sign changing from a gas station owner who once helped her in a storm? Catherine arrived an hour later, looking somewhat flustered, a rare sight for someone usually so composed. "I've had 6 calls from national media outlets this morning," she said, closing his office door. "They all want to run with the story." Thomas set down the newspaper. "I'm sorry. I know you value your privacy. Don't apologize," she interrupted, settling into what had become her usual spot on the edge of his desk. "I'm not worried about me. I'm used to press attention. But this is your life they're going to dig into. Your story, our story," Thomas corrected quietly, then felt his face warm at the implication. Catherine's expression softened. "Yes, I suppose it is." She picked up the newspaper, studying the photograph. "It's a good picture. You can't even see the grease streak on my cheek." "Third date, and already making the papers," Thomas teased, trying to lighten the moment. There, dinner at Sarah's diner had led to a Sunday afternoon walk, which had somehow turned into regular evening conversations that stretched long past discussion of business matters. Speaking of which, Catherine set down the paper and met his eyes. "Maybe we should talk about that, us, before the media narrative gets ahead of reality." Thomas felt his heart rate pick up. "What would you like to tell them?" "The truth," she said simply. "That sometimes helping a stranger in a storm leads to something unexpected. That success isn't just about profit margins and stock prices. It's about building something meaningful together." She paused. "That I find myself looking forward to Saturday mornings more than board meetings, even with all this attention." Thomas gestured at the newspaper. "It's going to make things complicated." Catherine laughed softly. "Thomas, I run a Fortune 500 company. Complicated is my normal." Her expression grew serious. "But this, you, the station, our Saturdays, this feels simple, right? Like coming home to something real." Before Thomas could respond, a knock at the door announced Mike's arrival. "Sorry to interrupt, but you both might want to see this." He held up his phone, showing a social media feed where their story was trending. "People are calling it the real life you've got mail in reverse. Corporate CEO falls for small business owner." "Falls for?" Thomas echoed, glancing at Catherine. She was already reading the comments, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Listen to this one. In a world of corporate takeovers and chain stores, it's nice to see a story about preserving what matters, about people choosing community over profit. Also, they're adorable together." Mike chuckled. "Can't argue with that last part." He headed back out, leaving them with the growing reality of their private connection becoming public knowledge. "We could try to control the narrative," Catherine said thoughtfully. "Issue a statement, set boundaries." Thomas looked at the newspaper photo again, at the natural way they fit together in that unguarded moment. "Or we could just keep being us. Let the story be what it is. 2 people who found something genuine in an unexpected place." Catherine's hand found his on the desk. "I like that version better." She smiled. Though we might need to find a new spot for Saturday mornings. I saw 3 photographers outside the station this morning. I think I know a place, Thomas said, thinking of his father's old workshop behind the house. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that stay a little private, even when the world's watching. The hospital bracelet lay stark white against Mike's weathered wrist, its printed text turning Thomas's world upside down. Harrison, Michael J., cardiac unit. He'd found Mike slumped over the morning paperwork, the half-finished coffee growing, in cold beside him. Now, sitting in the sterile hospital waiting room, Thomas felt like he was 16 again, scared, uncertain, watching another father figure fight for his life. Catherine arrived within minutes of his call, her board meeting abandoned. Mid-session, she didn't care who saw the CEO of Wells Technologies running through a hospital corridor in heels, her usual corporate composure replaced by genuine concern. "Any news?" she asked, sinking into the chair beside him. When Thomas shook his head, she took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally despite the public setting. "The doctors say it was a minor heart attack," Thomas managed. "They're running tests now." He squeezed her hand. "You didn't have to come. I know you had that important meeting." "Don't," she interrupted gently. "Mike is family. To both of us." Something in her tone made Thomas look up sharply. "Both of us?" Catherine took a deep breath, her free hand moving to her purse where she withdrew an old creased photograph. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said sooner." The photograph showed a much younger Mike, standing proudly in front of the gas station. Beside him was a young man in mechanic's coveralls, his arm around a little girl holding a toy wrench. Thomas recognized Catherine immediately, even as a child. She had the same determined look she got when tackling a particularly challenging repair. "The man next to Mike," Catherine said softly, "was my father." Thomas felt the world shift again. Your father knew Mike. They were best friends. Dad's garage was just 2 blocks from the station. They started their businesses around the same time, used to help each other out during tough times. She traced the edge of the photo. "I practically grew up in both places. Mike used to let me help change the numbers on the price sign while Dad worked on customers' cars. Why didn't you tell me?" At first I wasn't sure if Mike remembered me. It had been 30 years. And then, she paused, gathering her thoughts. "Then I saw how special your relationship with him was. I didn't want to complicate that with old history." A nurse appeared with update forms that needed signing. As Thomas dealt with the paperwork, his mind raced through implications. The way Catherine had known exactly how to help the station, her immediate understanding of its importance to the community, her determination to preserve its character. When he returned to his seat, Catherine was staring at the emergency room doors, lost in memory. The night Dad had to sell his garage, Mike stayed with him until dawn, helping him pack up his tools. When Dad died 5 years later, Mike was at the funeral. I saw him, but I was too caught up in building Wells Technologies, too focused on proving something to the world. She wiped at her eyes. "I should have said hello." "Is that why you really helped us?" Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Because of Mike's connection to your father?" Catherine turned to face him fully. "No, yes, it's complicated." She took both his hands in hers. "I helped because of what you did that night in the storm. Because you reminded me of Dad, of Mike, of everything I'd lost touch with while building my company. The connection to Mike, that was just the universe having a better sense of timing than I do." Before Thomas could respond, the doctor appeared. "Mr. Harrison is stable," she announced. "The attack was mild and we caught it in time. However," she paused, reviewing her charts, "his overall cardiac health is concerning. He's going to need to make some significant lifestyle changes. Less stress, more rest." Relief flooded Thomas, followed quickly by concern. "He'll never agree to step back from the station." "Maybe he won't have to," Catherine said thoughtfully. "The renovation plans, we could modify them. Add an apartment above the new service bay. Let him stay connected to the place he loves while..." Ensuring he gets the rest he needs. The doctor nodded approvingly. That kind of compromise could work. Having purpose is important for recovery, as long as it's properly balanced. They were allowed to visit Mike briefly. He looked smaller somehow, in the hospital bed, but his eyes lit up when he saw them together. "Well, if it isn't my two favorite people," he said weakly. "Catherine Wells, little cat who used to sort my penny tray by year. Took you long enough to come back." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "You recognized me? All this time?" "Course. I did. Got your father's eyes, don't you? And his way with engines." Mike smiled. "Been watching you two dance around each other just like your dad and I used to bet on which customers would end up together." He reached for their hands, joining them in his. "He'd be proud, you know, of both of you, building something real here." "Mike," Thomas started, but the older man shook his head. "Let an old man talk while he's got the excuse of good drugs." Mike's eyes twinkled despite his fatigue. "Catherine, your father and I had a dream once about combining our businesses, making something that would last. Life had other plans." He squeezed their joined hands. "But sometimes dreams don't die. They just wait for the right people to come along and give them new life." A nurse appeared to shoo them out, insisting Mike needed rest. In the hallway, Thomas and Catherine stood close, processing everything that had happened. "All this time," Thomas said wonderingly, "you had this connection to the station, to Mike, to everything we've been building." "I didn't plan it," Catherine insisted. "That night in the storm, I didn't even know it was Mike's station anymore. I just needed help, and you gave it, without question, just like Dad would have, just like Mike always did." She touched his cheek. "The connection I care most about now isn't in the past. It's right here." Thomas drew her closer, hospital protocols forgotten. "Stay for dinner. Sarah's keeping the diner open late for the regulars who want updates on Mike. We could tell them everything. No more secrets, no more complications, just our story, all of it." Catherine smiled through tears that had nothing to do with sadness. "I'd like that. Besides," she added with a hint of her usual spark, "I need to hear more about little penny-sorting cat. I have a feeling Mike's been saving those stories for the right moment." As they walked out, Thomas glanced back at Mike's room. Through the window, he could see the old man sleeping peacefully, the hospital bracelet a reminder of how quickly life could change. But maybe, he thought, some changes were just life's way of bringing the right pieces together at last. In Mike's hospital room the next evening, Catherine found an old photo tucked in his personal effects. Her father, in his mechanic's uniform, arm around Mike, both men beaming in front of a shared project car. The date on the back read, "Summer, 82, in her father's familiar scrawl. She was holding it when Thomas arrived with fresh coffee, and Mike's requested real food from Sarah's diner. "He's sleeping," Catherine said softly, showing Thomas the photo. "The nurse said he had a good day. More tests tomorrow, but they're optimistic." Thomas set down the food and coffee, studying the image. "Your father looks exactly like you when you're working on the Mustang. That same focused expression. Dad always said cars were simple. It was people who were beautifully complicated." She traced her father's image with gentle fingers. "Last night, after we left the hospital, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about all the connections, all the chances. That led us here." Thomas pulled up a chair beside her. "Having second thoughts?" "The opposite." Catherine met his eyes. "I'm thinking about how some things are meant to be, even if they take the scenic route getting there." She glanced at Mike's sleeping form. "When Dad died, I threw myself into building Wells Technologies. Thought if I could create something big enough, successful enough, it would fill the gap he left behind. Did it? No, but this place," she gestured to encompass not just the hospital room, but everything beyond it. The station, their Saturday mornings, the community they were building together. "This brings him back in all the right ways, not through missing him, but through living the values he taught me." Thomas took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Tell me about him. The real stories, not just the business connection. Catherine's smile warmed. He used to bring me to the station every Saturday while he and Mike worked on their project cars. I'd sit on that old stool behind the counter, the one you still keep there, and they'd quiz me on parts and tools. She laughed softly. Mike would slip me extra candy bars when Dad wasn't looking, saying every good mechanic needed brain fuel. That explains the candy bars he keeps stashed in his office, Thomas said. I always wondered about that. He never forgot, even when I did. Catherine's voice caught. All those years building my company, and the answer to what I was really looking for was right here. A place where business and heart work together, where profit doesn't come at the cost of people, like your father's garage, like his whole philosophy. He and Mike, they competed with each other on paper, two auto businesses blocks apart. But really, they supported each other. Shared tools, customers, knowledge. She squeezed Thomas's hand. That's what I want to build with you. Not just a successful station, but a model for how business can work when we remember what really matters. From the bed came a grunt. About time you two figured it out, Mike mumbled, eyes still closed. Been trying to teach that lesson for 40 years. Thomas and Catherine exchanged surprised looks, then laughed. How long have you been awake? Catherine asked. Long enough to hear you finally understanding your daddy's wisdom. Mike opened his eyes, twinkling despite his fatigue. Now, is that Sarah's meatloaf I smell? As they helped Mike sit up and arranged. His dinner, Thomas watched Catherine fuss over the pillows, noted how naturally she fit into this moment, this place, their lives. The photo lay on the side table, two old friends grinning at a future they couldn't see but somehow helped create. You know, Thomas said later, as they walked to their cars in the hospital parking lot, your father was right about cars being simpler than people, but he was right about something else too. What's that? Sometimes the most complicated things are worth the extra effort. He pulled her close, hospital lights painting silver in her hair. Like falling in love with a CEO who moonlights as a mechanic. Catherine's smile outshone the fluorescent glare. Or falling in love with a gas station owner who teaches billionaires how to change price signs by hand. Their kiss was gentle, unhurried, carrying the weight of past connections and future promises. Above them, in his hospital room, Mike watched with satisfaction before turning back to his meatloaf. Some engines, he thought, just needed the right timing to run perfectly. The partnership agreement lay unsigned on Thomas's desk, its legal language a stark contrast to the personal milestone it represented. Catherine had drafted it herself, late one night after they'd finished working on the Mustang in his father's workshop. Equal partners, it stated simply, in all ventures moving forward. Thomas studied the document as morning sunlight streamed through his office window. The station hummed with early activity. Sarah from the diner dropping off coffee, Mr. Jenkins discussing baseball with the new mechanic they'd hired, Mrs. Peterson getting her weekly lottery ticket. Through the window, he could see the digital price sign working in perfect harmony with the manual one he still changed each morning. Catherine found him there, still contemplating the agreement. She'd driven straight from a board meeting but had swapped her heels for the work boots she now kept in her car trunk. Having second thoughts, she asked, settling into what had become her spot on his desk. The opposite, Thomas replied, looking up at her. I'm thinking about how far we've come from that night in the rain, about all the things that had to align to bring us here. She smiled, reaching over to straighten his collar, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Mike's recovery is going well. The doctors say he could move into the new apartment above the station next week. I know. He called this morning to make sure we're still planning to install that workshop space he requested. Thomas chuckled. Apparently retirement means having more time to teach local kids about engines, not actually slowing down. Like father, like daughter, Catherine said, nodding toward the garage where their newly launched youth mentorship program was in full swing. Local teenagers learning basic car maintenance, business skills, and the value of community service. All while earning credits toward trade school or college. Thomas took her hand, marveling at how it could be equally at home in a corporate boardroom or covered in engine grease. "You know, when you first offered me this place, I thought it was just about saving a small business. I never imagined that you'd end up with a pushy CEO who can't stay away from manual labor." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "That I'd find someone who understands both worlds so perfectly," he corrected, "who sees that success isn't just about profit margins or stock prices. It's about building something meaningful together." Catherine's expression softened. "The board thinks I'm crazy, you know. The CEO of Wells Technologies, spending weekends at a gas station, developing software specifically for independent service stations, dating the owner of our pilot location." She shrugged. "But our quarterly reports show otherwise. Turns out, doing good business and doing good aren't mutually exclusive." Thomas reached for a pen. "Speaking of business," he signed the partnership agreement with steady hands. "Equal partners in everything." Catherine took the pen, adding her signature beside his. "In everything," she echoed, and they both knew they were talking about more than just business arrangements. The morning continued its steady rhythm around them. Customers coming and going, young apprentices learning under the watchful eye of their new master mechanic, Mike supervising the apartment construction from his temporary command center in the coffee corner. The station had evolved, but its heart remained unchanged. "Valley View called again," Catherine mentioned casually. "Offered to buy us out for triple what the place is worth." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And I told them we're not interested in selling at any price." She grinned. "But we are interested in showing other independent stations how to compete effectively. The software platform is ready to roll out, and 6 stations have already signed. Up for our community-focused business model, saving the world one gas station at a time," Thomas teased. "More like one community at a time," Catherine corrected. "Dad and Mike had it right all along. Business works best when it brings people together." As if on cue, Mrs. Peterson called out from the front counter, "Thomas, dear, Catherine, your sign needs updating. Gas prices are down 3 cents. They shared a look of pure contentment. "Shall we?" Thomas asked, reaching for the number set. "Wouldn't miss it," Catherine replied, taking his hand. "Some traditions are worth keeping, especially when they're about more than just changing numbers." Together, they headed out to update the manual sign, their joined shadows stretching across the lot in the morning sun. Above them, the new station logo gleamed, Thomas and Catherine's Gas and Service, where community matters. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a promise they renewed every day, in ways both big and small. The security camera footage played on Thomas's laptop in stark black and white, showing 3 Valley View executives entering their station after hours. They moved with casual confidence, clearly not expecting to be recorded as they approached the newly installed diagnostic equipment in the service bay. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. Catherine stood behind Thomas's chair, one hand gripping his shoulder as they watched. The executives examined their custom software interface, one taking photos while another typed on a tablet. They were inside for exactly 12 minutes before leaving, looking pleased with themselves. "Industrial espionage," Catherine said quietly, her CEO voice emerging, the one she used in hostile takeover attempts. "They're trying to steal our integrated management system before we can patent it. Can they do that?" Thomas asked, pausing the footage on a clear shot of their faces. "They can try." Catherine was already on her phone, fingers flying across the screen. But they made 2 crucial mistakes. First, they underestimated our security systems. And second, she smiled grimly, they forgot who they're dealing with. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Catherine's legal team arrived before dawn, turning Thomas's office into a war room. Mike watched from his new apartment above, the station occasionally sending down suggestions via text. His doctor had strictly forbidden him from getting directly involved in stressful situations. "They're planning to launch a copycat system next week," Catherine's head of security reported, hanging up from an intelligence call. Their board meets tomorrow to approve the final specs. Thomas studied the schematics of their system spread across his desk. But it won't work properly. They only saw the interface, not the underlying architecture that makes it special. Exactly. Catherine looked up from her laptop. They'll rush out an inferior product, damaging their reputation and potentially causing serious issues for any stations that adopt it. We can't let that happen, Thomas said firmly. Not just for us, but for the independent stations that might get hurt in the process. Catherine's expression softened as she looked at him. Even in crisis, his first thought was for the community they served. I have an idea, she said, but it's a bit unconventional. The next morning, Valley View's board members filed into their corporate headquarters for the emergency session. They found Thomas and Catherine already in the boardroom, calmly waiting. This is a private meeting, Valley View's CEO blustered, but Catherine held up her hand. Actually, it's not. Not anymore. She nodded to her legal team, who began distributing documents. As of 6 a.m., Wells Technologies has acquired a controlling interest in Valley View Stations, Inc. The room erupted in chaos. Thomas watched Catherine handle it with the same steady confidence she used when fixing engines, methodically, patiently, each move purposeful. You had no right, Valley View's CEO started. But Catherine cut him off. We had every right, especially after your late-night visit to our station. Would you like to see the footage? She gestured to the screen behind her. Or shall we discuss how to move forward productively? Thomas stepped forward. We're not here to destroy Valley View. We're here to transform it. He opened his laptop, showing their full system interface. Our software isn't just about efficiency, it's about community. It helps stations serve their customers better, not just process them faster. The future of service stations isn't in eliminating the human element, Catherine continued. It's in enhancing it. Our system proves that technology and personal touch can work together. She smiled at Thomas. Sometimes the best innovations come from remembering what matters most. Over the next hour, they outlined their vision. Valley View stations would be offered the chance to become part of a new network, one that preserved local ownership while providing corporate support. Their software would be properly implemented, with training and community engagement programs included. You're offering us a partnership, one board member said slowly, instead of a takeover. We're offering you a chance to be part of something bigger than profit margins, Thomas replied, to build something that matters. The vote was unanimous. Later that evening, back at their station, Thomas and Catherine sat in his father's workshop, the Mustang's engine purring smoothly behind them, a sound of victory in more ways than one. You could have crushed them, Thomas observed. Instead, you chose to transform them. Catherine leaned against him, her corporate armor set aside for the day. I learned that from you. Sometimes the biggest changes come from small acts of kindness. She smiled, like helping a stranger in a storm. Through the workshop window, they could see Mike in his apartment, surrounded by local kids as he taught them about engine timing. The station's lights glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, both price signs, digital and manual, standing as symbols of how old and new could work together. We should celebrate, Thomas said, pulling Catherine closer. Sarah's making your favorite. Pie tonight. Tempting. But first, Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. I had something made for you. Inside, Thomas found a replica of his father's old toolkit key ring, but with a significant addition. Alongside the worn original key hung a new one, modern and sleek. The tag read simply, Partner. No other words were needed. In that moment, with the station humming behind them and their future stretching out ahead, they had everything that mattered. Each other, their community, and a shared purpose that made both their worlds better. The thank you cards started arriving 3 weeks after the Valley View transformation. They filled a corkboard in the station's office, each one telling a story of positive change. a station owner in Michigan whose business had been saved, a single mother in Oregon who could now afford to keep her family's three-generation service station running, a retired mechanic in Florida who cried when he learned his life's work wouldn't be turned into another soulless express mart. Thomas pinned up the latest batch as Catherine came in from her morning price sign ritual. She'd insisted on learning the manual change process, making it their shared morning meditation. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, reading over his shoulder. "Thanks to your program, I can send my daughter to college while keeping our station open," she read aloud. "You've proven that progress doesn't have to mean losing our heart." "Mike says we're going to need a bigger board," Thomas said, leaning back into her embrace. "The training program has a waiting list now. Turns out a lot of station owners want to learn how to blend traditional service with modern efficiency." Catherine smiled against his shoulder. "Speaking of Mike, have you seen his latest innovation? He's turned the apartment workshop into what he calls the Legacy Lab, teaching kids everything from basic car maintenance to business ethics. He said something about you agreeing to be a guest lecturer," Thomas teased. "The Billionaire CEO teaching teenagers about the importance of checking tire pressure. Well, someone taught me that the simplest services often matter most." She turned him to face her. "The Wells Valley network has expanded to over 50 stations. Now, every one of them maintaining their local character while sharing in the technological support." Thomas nodded toward his father's toolkit, now mounted in a place of honor on the wall. "Dad used to say that the best tools work so well you barely notice them. That's what we've created. Technology that enhances the human connection instead of replacing it." Through the window, they could see their newest apprentice helping Mrs. Peterson with her weekly gas fill-up, taking time to check her oil and wash her windows. The young woman was one of Mike's students, part of their scholarship program that combined technical training with business education. "The board finally stopped questioning my hands-on involvement here," Catherine said, brushing a streak of grease from Thomas's cheek, a gesture that had become their own private sign of affection. "Apparently, our integrated community approach has become a case study at 3 business schools. And all it took was a broken-down car in the rain," Thomas mused, "and a kind soul who didn't see a stranger in expensive clothes, just someone who needed help." Catherine's eyes grew thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about Dad's old garage location. It's been empty since the development deal fell through." Thomas caught her meaning immediately. "A training center for the next generation of service-minded mechanics and business owners? The Robert Wells Institute for Automotive Innovation and Community Service," Catherine suggested. "With a certain gas station owner as co-director, of course, if he's interested." Before Thomas could respond, Mike's voice crackled over the new intercom system. "If you two are done making eyes at each other up there, we've got a bunch of eager students down here waiting to learn about hybrid engine maintenance. And Catherine, bring that fancy electric car of yours. They've got questions about the battery system." They shared a laugh, gathering their teaching materials. The station had evolved into something neither of them had imagined that stormy night. Not just a business, but a model for combining progress with tradition, success with service. "Ready to help shape the future?" Catherine asked, reaching for his hand. Thomas looked at the wall of thank you cards, each one representing a community preserved, a legacy protected, a future secured. Then at the woman beside him, who had brought her brilliant mind and generous heart to his small corner of the world and helped make it something extraordinary. "With you, always." Together, they headed down to meet their students, walking past the price signs that had first brought them together. One digital, one manual, both serving the same purpose in their own unique way, just like the two of them. The keys to the new franchise gleamed in the morning light. Not just any keys, but the original set from Catherine's father's garage, carefully preserved and now symbolic of their latest venture. The Robert Wells Institute stood on the exact spot where Catherine had first learned to love engines. Though the building itself was a perfect blend of past and present, just like everything they created together. The renovation had maintained the original brick facade while incorporating state-of-the-art training facilities inside. The old garage doors had been restored rather than replaced, their weathered wood telling stories of decades of service. Above them, solar panels and modern climate systems showed their commitment to future-focused thinking. Dad would have loved this, Catherine said softly, standing with Thomas in what had once been her father's office. The space still held its original workbench, now complemented by advanced diagnostic equipment, especially the scholarship program. Thomas squeezed her hand, knowing what this moment meant to her. Mike says the first class is already oversubscribed. Turns out a lot of young people want to learn about combining traditional service values with modern business practices. Speaking of Mike, Catherine smiled, have you seen his new title? Master Instructor of Legacy Skills and Community Integration. He designed it himself and insisted it fit on a jacket, Thomas laughed. Though I notice he still introduces himself as just Mike to all the students. Through the windows, they could see their first group of trainees arriving, a diverse mix of young people from all backgrounds, each chosen not just for their technical aptitude, but for their understanding of community service. The program would teach them everything from advanced automotive technology to small business management, with a special emphasis on maintaining human connections in an increasingly digital world. You know what makes me proudest? Catherine said, watching the students gather. Look at how they're already talking to each other, sharing stories. Just like our station, this place isn't just about learning skills. It's about building relationships. Thomas nodded toward a familiar face among the arriving students. Isn't that Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter, the one who used to help you change the manual sign? Jenny, Catherine confirmed. Full scholarship. She reminds me so much of myself at that age, always asking questions about how things work. Why? They matter. She paused, touching the old workbench, though she has something I didn't back then. What's that? A whole community supporting her dreams. Catherine turned to face him. That's what we're really building here, isn't it? Not just a training center or a business model, but a way of preserving what matters while embracing what's new. Before Thomas could respond, Mike's voice came over the newly installed intercom. They'd deliberately chosen one with a slightly retro sound, matching the building's aesthetic. If you two are done having a moment up there, we've got some eager students waiting to learn about the Wells Valley Integrated Service approach. And Catherine, they're particularly interested in hearing about a certain stormy night and a broken-down car. They shared a smile at Mike's gentle teasing. Their story had become something of a legend among their growing network of stations and students, not just for its romantic elements, but for what it represented about the power of simple kindness and the importance of maintaining human connections. In business, ready to help shape the future? Thomas asked, echoing the question that had become their private motto. Catherine reached up to brush an imaginary grease smudge from his cheek, another of their personal traditions. With you? Always. As they headed down to meet their first class, they passed the Institute's mission statement, elegantly etched in glass beside Robert Wells's restored toolbox, where traditional values drive modern innovation. The morning sun streamed through the old garage doors, casting long shadows that seemed to connect past and present. Outside, the carefully preserved manual price sign from Catherine's Father's Day stood alongside a digital display showing current market rates and training program information. Like everything in their world, they worked together in perfect harmony. Mike waited for them at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes twinkling. Well, well, he said, loud enough for only them to hear. Look what a little rain and kindness built. He gestured to the eager faces of their first class. Shall we show them how it's done? Together, they stepped forward to greet the future. They were creating, one student, one lesson, one act of service at a time. The new station sign went up exactly 1 year after that stormy night, its lettering both elegant and unpretentious. Thomas and Catherine's Gas and Service. Below it, smaller text read, "A Wells Valley community partner, where tradition meets." Tomorrow. The morning sun caught the freshly painted surface, making it glow like a beacon of everything they'd built together. Thomas stood in the early dawn light, coffee in hand, watching Catherine change the manual price numbers. She'd long since claimed this daily ritual as her own. She moved with practiced ease, consulting her tablet for market rates while maintaining the personal touch that had become their trademark. A small crowd of regulars had gathered, as they did most mornings, sharing coffee and conversation. "Looking good, Cat," Mike called from his customary spot by the door. His health had improved enough that doctors now allowed him his morning supervisory duties, though they still insisted he delegate the actual work. He didn't seem to mind, having found his true calling in mentoring the steady stream of students who came through their training program. Catherine finished the price change and joined Thomas, automatically reaching up to wipe a phantom grease smudge from his cheek, their private gesture that had come to mean everything from "good morning" to "I love you." "Quite a year," she said softly, looking around at everything that had grown from that chance encounter in the rain. The station had become the flagship for their entire network, a living laboratory where tradition and innovation worked in harmony. The service bays were full of both experienced mechanics and eager students, while the newly expanded coffee corner hosted community gatherings and business workshops. "Remember when you thought I was crazy for offering to buy this place?" she teased, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Remember when you thought changing prices manually was inefficient?" he countered, pulling her closer. Mike chuckled as he approached. "Them. Remember when you two thought you were fooling anyone about falling in love?" He handed them each a fresh coffee, Sarah's special blend, now famous throughout their network of stations. "Your father would be proud, Cat. Both of what you've built and who you built it with." Through the morning mist, they could see the Robert Wells Institute down the street, its lights already on as the first class of the day began. The old garage doors stood open, revealing a perfect blend of classic tools and cutting-edge technology. Just yesterday, they'd graduated their 100th student, each one carrying forward their vision of service-minded innovation. "Speaking of building things," Catherine said, turning to face Thomas, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. Thomas opened it carefully, finding a key ring similar to the partner, one she'd given him months ago. But this key was different, older, more personal. "It's to my father's house," she explained quietly. "The one I grew up in. It's been sitting empty since Mom moved to Florida, and I thought—" She took a deep breath. "I thought maybe we could make it our home. Together." Thomas looked at the key, then at Catherine, seeing in her eyes the same blend of strength and vulnerability that had first drawn him to her that stormy night. "Together," he agreed softly, drawing her close. Mike cleared his throat. "Well, if you two are done making life-changing decisions before breakfast, we've got a full day ahead. The new hybrid diagnostic system is being installed. Jenny's teaching her first solo class at the Institute, and—" He smiled broadly. "Sarah's bringing by some pie to celebrate our station's first anniversary." As if on cue, the morning crowd began filtering in. Regular customers, students, fellow station owners from their network, all part of the community they'd built together. The digital price sign blinked its modern welcome, while the manual numbers Catherine had just changed caught the strengthening sunlight, both serving their purpose in their own unique way. Thomas and Catherine shared a look that held all their history and all their future. Around them their vision had become reality, a place where business served community, where progress honored tradition, where simple kindness could still transform lives. "Ready for another year?" Catherine asked, her eyes sparkling with the same determination that had built an empire and found its heart in a small gas station. Thomas kissed her softly, tasting coffee and promise. "With you? Always." Above them, the new sign gleamed in the morning sun, not just a marker for a business, but a testament to what can grow from a single act of kindness on a stormy night, when the right hearts find each other and remember what truly matters.